So we are your esteemed facilitators of the day, and we get to talk about our favorite topic, because what does everyone say when you first ask them, what's the most important thing at your company? What's the greatest resource? What is it? People. So this should be the most important topic. We're talking about your number one resource. Most important topic of the day. We had great discussions this morning on scalability and things, but we're here to talk about what I personally consider is absolutely the most important piece of your digital transformation journey. This is it, people. So hopefully we're going to hear and give you some practical advice and things that we can do. And I wanted to start out to set the stage. The first question I have, and Jim here is my expert in all things, so like I can key something up, and then he's going to give very specific examples of the good and the bad, right? Like nobody's perfect here. We're pretty humble. We've made lots of mistakes. Actually, that's one of my favorite things about my job is we learn from the mistakes. There's so many folks when you convene, everyone shares their stories, lots of good, lots of bad. You got to learn from them. So my question is, first, start with point one about the digital workforce. Definition. Do you actually know, can you define what are the jobs you need for your manufacturing digital journey future? Who can define the jobs that they need? Do you know what you need today? What are you going to need in the next 5 years in terms of jobs, skills? Yeah?
So I know what I need today. I don't know what I need in 5 years. So I know that I need domain experts, which I have plenty. I know that um, I know I need data scientists, people who can understand, and I know I need to have people who understand our workflows and how we can make them more efficient. So that's my starting point. Um,
It's a good list for sure. And of course, I learned something this morning too. I need a data ethicist. I'm not sure exactly I know what that is. We like to think we're an ethical company to begin with, but I'm not sure if I know what data ethicacy means. Although we have to protect individuals' data for sure. When I think we look at it, I think it's an evolving landscape, and I think you gave a very good answer. You begin with your subject matter experts, and then you kind of work from there, and fill in the gaps. And so, I think one of the things that we did several years ago was do some capability mapping and kind of asked ourselves a question. Okay, well, here's where we want to go. Here's how our strategies are lining up. Do we have all the right capabilities in order to make that happen? But first and foremost, what I would say is specifically at the professional level, that we've really had to wrestle with and ask ourselves is, do we have an organization that's actually set up to learn? Because in the end of the day, the digital transformation is a journey, not a destination. And in order to travel on the journey, you have to be able to be willing to be humble and learn as you go, and make mistakes and learn from those quickly, and really help drive an organization that isn't afraid to fail necessarily. Controlled failure is a little bit better than uncontrolled failure, but certainly one that is going to learn from their mistakes and adapt and adjust and keep driving forward. And I think that's true at all levels of the organization. Because I don't think I don't know if it was Mike or somebody said this morning. Punishment isn't a great way to drive change. Temporary. Yeah. Big sticks sometimes work for a little while, and then eventually somebody figures out how to break your stick. So, I think we've got to have a good learning organization overall, and it begins with a good capability map in terms of what we overall need. And I think the roles are going to change over time. I mean, depending upon where your focus area is, where you're trying to concentrate your efforts. I think there's a different skill set and capability to drive kind of shop floor efficiency kind of changes versus what you might need to transform your engineering function to be more digital thread focused. So I don't think there's a single formula or answer to the overall question.
Mike, question, hands raised. Anyone? Oh, do you have a microphone? Where's that? There's two in the back. We can get to you even in the corner.
So we took a look at it from a insurance perspective. And what we said was our goal was to make our plants run all the time and to get rid of the embedded insurance that we carry in our facilities. And a lot of the times that embedded insurance shows up as bodies. And so what do you absolutely have to have? And what do you absolutely have to be good at if your plants run all the time? And start out from not putting insurance in from the start. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that what you need to be good at is collaboration, coordination, planning, and scheduling. And that's it. Because if your plant runs all the time, that's the basis of what you need to be good at. And everything else is an economics conversation about how much risk do you have with regard to the insurance, which comes back to the capabilities mapping that you use.
Okay, yeah, I might challenge the room a little bit. There's two sides to this, and I know what I think of when I hear, digital workforce.
We like challenges, just so you know. More controversy, the better. So throw it out there.
I've got kids in both high school and college. It's not, how do we train people to become the digital workforce? How do we prepare for the digital workforce that is coming? They already have work processes. They already have a familiarity with the technology and an expectation that doesn't necessarily match up with the platform that we're providing them when they show up for their first job. Mm-hmm.
That's a great one. Who agrees with that? Excellent. Yeah, share some more stories. There's a couple hands of folks raised. We'll get the mic around to you. So, when you all look around the room and when you answered that question, right, who thinks they have the perfect workforce right now at your facilities? Raise your hand. Who's got the best workforce? Who's got it all? Right, so how are we preparing for the ones to come, and what are you guys missing? And what are the tools to get there? So to your point, you're saying sometimes they already know the tools, but what's missing? What do you guys need? Like, so for you to have this great workforce, what do you personally believe you're missing now? And how can it be helped? Come on, you already all agreed that you don't have a good workforce. Google Docs. That's an answer. Okay, I see some more now. Yeah, over here. Oh.
I mean, in many cases, it's not going to be a new workforce. You're going to redefine the work of the existing workforce. So one of the things that we're looking at is rather than having the traditional operator operate the equipment, we're going to automate some of that and shift from an operator-centric activity at the control room to more of a monitoring where we use the technology to take some of that load off the operators so they can then create greater value than just silencing alarms. So I think part of it's going to be redefining the work based upon the new technologies that are capabilities that keep continuing. And I think that's going to be a constant evolution. It's never going to stop. It's going to be that journey that you referred to. So it's not like, all right, boom, we redefine the job. It's going to stay that way for 10 more years. I think we'll be in a constant evolution. The other thing that, we're looking at, we don't have to have every skill set physically at every location anymore. There's a lot of technology with remote operations, remote monitoring, remote support. So I think there's going to be a lot of discussions about, again, what has to be physically located at a specific manufacturing site, and then what's going to be available remotely, regionally, part-time, third-party. So I think there's going to be a lot of redefining of work based upon, again, it doesn't have to be physically sitting in the sites anymore.
One conversation that we have around what's that perfect workforce look like, you might say it's kind of like 3 a.m. on Sunday morning at the plant. That's Colonel Carter, by the way. That's what he says.
Can I ask a question to the group? So where do HR and training fit in all of this? They tend to be seen as fairly tactical, get things done for us groups. Yet when you're talking about this, dynamic interpretation of how people are going to work who've been there a while and new, that's a whole different, fairly strategic proposition. I mean, does anybody have anybody in their organization that involves those two groups on a strategic level?
I guess mostly I have an example of what you're talking about. A couple of years ago, when we wanted to expand our analytics group, we worked with HR, we wrote a description, and I don't know where they advertised it. I don't think they knew where to advertise it. They wouldn't let us advertise on our own. And interestingly enough, for the most part, when we advertise internally and externally. And for the most part, we were pleased as punch with the people inside of Dow. And there was for two reasons. One was because I don't think we knew how to advertise. I don't think we knew how to write a job description and where to put it. And then the second reason is that subject matter expertise is not nothing, right? That if you can marry analytics and subject matter expertise, that's a winner. And so we ended up hiring internally.
Yeah, that's just while we're waiting for some other comments. I mean, I would challenge you, and of course, we all have our own opinions of HR function in our own companies. But if you're not using HR as a strategic partner in what you're doing on digital transformation, you're missing the boat. And, I think engaging professionals in the way you design, acquire, train talent is really important. I think somebody said in the morning session this morning that, psychology and learning is a big piece of understanding, and there's a whole science behind that. And hopefully your HR team knows that science, and they're working with you to do that. I mean, when I partner closely with HR, we get much better results than when I just throw job descriptions over the fence to them. And it helps in terms of the recruiting and the way we do that and the way we look at it. And then inside our own operations excellence program, which we base on TPM, is the T&D pillar of TPM. So everything that we're doing around digital transformation is also integrated into the T&D pillar of TPM. So we actually have skill matrices and design training and everything inside our plants that is designed to bring the employees in on an interactive basis through our training centers, which every plant has a training center, to learn and understand on how we're developing. And we're starting to deeper integrate some of our digital capabilities into that T&D pillar as well. So, my advice to you is if you haven't sat down with your HR partner and really sketched out strategically what's important to you, then you're missing a big opportunity going forward.
So we are actually doing that. Just for example, we're at the beginning of it, though. We're trying to engage technology with training and HR. And of course, we want to play with the new toys. So we've got a VR pilot that we're doing with the whole training concept to try and somehow bring it all together. But I agree with you. You absolutely have to engage them and for better results.
I think in addition to sort of HR as a strategic partner, is thinking about how you're using the community you're based in as a strategic partner. And I think this touches a little bit on what you said, which is how are you working with the educational institutions in the region? How are you working with the young people in the region? How are you thinking about collaborating with the economic development groups in the region to create a community profile that supports the worker needs? And even things like promoting new position descriptions and trying to figure out how do you reach the right audience. I think what we hear a lot from our partners is some of them are doing that and seeing a lot of success, or at least getting a better understanding of what the expectations are for the future workers, and others have not seen success. So I would be curious if those in the room are partnering with the academic institutions or the community development groups in their region, if they're seeing success with that.
Raise your hand if you're partnered with an academic institution that you work with, kind of closely.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, if you don't mind? So everybody who did raise their hand at some point, how many of you actually have access to those folks that you're partnered with and have interactions with them? Can you show of hands? 3, 4, 5. So no. So if you're somebody who is tasked with helping change your workforce and get things done in a different way, yet you're not interacting with the talent out there, then it's an access issue for your company, not allowing you or enabling you to really be involved in how that talent sees what you do, knows what you do, and you communicate to them what's important to you. That's, I think, is again another, it's an organizational breakdown. If that's not happening, it's another HR opportunity, so to speak.
Right. Totally agree.
Maybe to pull on that thread a little more, and I think it's more that the new workforce is coming to us with a skill set and with a way of learning. And it's not just new, it's the last 10, 15 years. And I think many of us have learned new ways of learning, and it's instant, it's on demand. I've got a question now, I'm going to go get my answer. So in addition to HR, and maybe I'm jumping topics, but it's really working with your training organizations as well, and your vendors who supply training, and just really pushing and saying, we need that little button there that's the equivalent of a Google search or a YouTube video that gets me the right answers I need now, because I don't come with all the answers, but I come with the ability to seek the answers, and that's the way I operate now. That's what I see a lot in the new workforce coming in.
Yeah, and a lot of self-serve learning too, and probably the hardest thing we have to do with some of our newer employees, younger employees, is teach them that Google isn't always right with the answer. But yeah, and I think the other thing that we see, and I see it in my kids, I have 2 college-age kids as well, is the way they collaborate is completely different. It's very disjointed and remote versus in person and in meetings and something like that. There's a lot of power in that, and it takes a realization in the organization that that kind of collaboration enables you to do, I think, what you said earlier, not have workers in every location, positioned like we would traditionally do, to look at staffing differently, to look at organizational design differently, so that we get the best out of everybody using the modern tools and collaboration methods today. I'm still not a great video chatter, though. I prefer not to chat on my computer with the video on.
I mean, are people out there, are you guys looking for, let's just take, kind of going off that question, millennials? Who thinks having more millennials join their workforce is a good thing? Raise your hand. Okay, that's good. Who thinks that's a problem? See, I know, go ahead.
Educational part of it. So I'm now retired, still working with ARC, but I retired from my primary job. Anyhow, I'm beyond the millennials. My 5-year-old grandson just started kindergarten. He knows everything about virtual reality in MindSphere, and he literally has a cigar box and a single board computer, and he's teaching himself electronics. At 5 years old. Grandpa didn't help him. He's asking questions of Grandpa that a college student would have been asking a few years ago. So how do we challenge? How do we channel that talent that's literally right under the surface here in front of us? It's happening without, the formal education system is not keeping up with the potential that's out there right now. So.
I've got some young people on my team that, were very quick learners and contributed very quickly. And as he's saying, I don't think there's any need to train or teach people the technology. I mean, my high schoolers know things that I don't know, and I'm, try to stay close to the technology. It really goes back to defining the work and what work needs to be done. As I don't remember the exact numbers, but Einstein said if I had an hour to save the world, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem. So if we go back to defining the problem and defining the work, how we do it after that point, I think is pretty simple.
I think that gets a little bit at what you said in the beginning, Chandra, which is what does the work look like? What do the needs look like? So if you've got youth who are actually interested in this kind of thing, how do you create the environment for them to thrive? And I think that that's a conversation we're having frequently with the manufacturers we work with, which is contrary to at least what I was originally hearing before coming into the role I'm in now, is that nobody was interested in this kind of thing. And actually, as it turns out, they're quite interested, but we need to find ways to get them into the facility, get them involved in the work. Again, I go back to a community approach. How is the community opening its doors to let kindergartners, middle schoolers, high schoolers in to help them understand what's happening right in their own backyard? We work with a manufacturer in a small town who said, I've lived here my whole life. I drove down the street my whole life. I had no idea that that's what this building was doing until I was looking for a job. And so how do we kind of open the doors and show that this is actually not as different from what you're learning in the classroom or at home, in your free time, as you think, and that this is actually a really interesting career opportunity?
So I didn't raise my hand when you asked if I wanted to hire millennials, and I didn't raise my hand when you said I didn't want to hire millennials, because I think the answer is always balance. And having that, I think you'd mentioned diversified workforce, where you have people with this color hair on their face, and then you also have young people with new ways of doing it. But you have to align on what you're trying to do, and not necessarily the approach, but what you're trying to accomplish, and align on that. And then you'll have ideas from all kinds of different people, and the key is to empower people to do that. And that's where I find it most difficult is having that whole empowerment coming from the whole organization. One leader can say, I'm going to empower, but if that leader's not empowered, then there's only so much empowerment can happen.
Okay, I just wanted to build on that diversity thing. It isn't just the young and old. What about some females? What about some people of color? What about some people of different nationalities? They all have different perspectives, and we're all out here in the same place trying to do the same thing and make a living for ourselves. So I challenge you as well to think of breaking those barriers about what sex belongs to what role, and be open to looking at changes in those.
Thank you. I think that's a great point. There's a couple more hands I think that come over here. What I will tell you on that is absolutely, this is one of the great things about the digital revolution. Because everyone knows, this is all based on data. For example, we're going to get all this data. Your data is going to be wrong. What you are basing your decisions on is going to be wrong if it is just based on the past data. That's what, if everything is based on old white men doing X, your data set is wrong. It's flawed. And so this is going to become a lot more apparent. We talk about tribal knowledge. We talk about that. The reality is in the new kind of digital world, in the new digital workspace, if you do not have diversity, you will not be making the right decisions. And this is, though, from the top to the bottom. There's been lots of studies out now that looked at the Fortune 500 companies. If you do not have women and more diverse people on your board, you are less profitable. Period. That's a statistical fact, that they've analyzed it to back. The more diverse the boards are, the more diverse leadership is, the better your money is. So if that doesn't motivate people, right? And now with the digital revolution, it's going to be easier to do that because you're right. These roles are going to change, these prior biases. It's going to be a really different world when we talk about the future generations that are coming in. So I look at it as an opportunity. This is a big opportunity for us to help fill, and in particular, the manufacturing pipeline. Let's, again, be clear. We may talk about, there's people that have the jobs or, the jobs are out there. There is huge pipeline issues today, right now in manufacturing. I would ask a question on how many people are, have jobs. There's 2 million plus jobs out there right now if you want to go look in the manufacturing workforce. right? Are you looking for folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're always looking for them. But I think, this is what's going to happen with on the digital side. We now have a whole new group of people coming in different skill sets. They're already trained up for it. They're already adaptable. They're already continuous learners, like kind of to your point. They already have incredible skill sets. We need to find out the way we can incorporate them into our existing structure, right? And as quickly as possible. Because the pipeline of the past, welders, machinists, fitters, which is still a problem today, let's be clear, right? What is going to happen with where's your cyber, where's your data analyst? You're going to have another pipeline issue, and the only way it's going to be filled is through a diverse workforce. You will not be able to fill that pipeline. So
I'd like to add one point to that. So thank you for bringing that up. And actually, in my department, we made an active choice to look just for the passions in people. And regardless of what sort of positions they held before, what their degrees were and what their background was, and try to pull together people who brought in a different perspective. So in my team, my team represents 14 different countries and about 25% women, and all sorts of different backgrounds. Some who came up through working on their tools and ended up getting a functional degree and hired them in at 60 to join the team. Kids right out of university and from all over the world. And the success we've had working together has been amazing. So one thing, when everyone speaks a different first language, they spend more time and effort to make sure that they're understood. And this solves a lot of communication issues by just realizing that the fundamental language is different between people. And the fun part is every morning the team decides what language they're going to speak that day, so I'm constantly confused. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. I think I missed my gap by 5-10 minutes, but it's not all the doom and gloom on the pipeline because, if you look at the last 5-7 years, I mean, the gap in the vocational trades has been huge in the U.S., but I think the states, the education system has been at these manufacturing conferences, and we've taken the time to sit down because I know I'm out of Columbus, Ohio area, and there's been a huge investment or reinvestment at that VOTEC school level. And now I think the companies have to get involved and start recruiting at that level because I think a lot of the modeling is coming out of like Germany, where they go down to the high school level as well. But we've seen that refresh, at least in Ohio. So people are starting to listen. It's behind the time a little bit, but it's not all bad. So.
I think, I hear some themes coming out of the conversation here today that I totally agree with, and I think we have evidence and experience in this space that shows we can drive results. One, as I think, is that you've said multiple times on this side of the room, defining the problem well. What mountain are you trying to take? How are you trying to take it? Why are you taking it? And just engaging your teams in that conversation, and what does that mean? Building a diverse team to go solve the problem is really critical in the end of the day. Teams that we're building now, we're actually purposely defining and assigning from a diversity perspective to bring in that difference of thought, whether it's female, cultural, race, whatever the case may be, background, even discipline. I go back again. I'll use the example of HR. Why would I put a HR person on a process control transformation project? Because I get a different concept. I get a different point of view. I get a different angle for how to solve the problem, and that usually works well with teams, et cetera. And then empowering the team to go solve the problem. Basically giving them the freedom to go solve. And giving them, maybe you give them a set of guardrails. I don't know. It depends upon how comfortable you are, right? But the wider the breadth you give them, usually the more interesting the result is in the end of the day. And we have to get comfortable in that. I think it all comes back again, and I'll go to something that was said on the panel this morning. It all goes back to leadership. How are you leading the organization? How are you leading from the front? How are you demonstrating that capability, that mindset, that thinking? And then quickly fade into the back and let the team run forward ahead of you. I think that's important. Yep.
I have a question about that.
Yep.
So, because it's a great concept. But I have a question. So the middle managers that are working underneath you, that have these teams, that they're going to develop these working collaborative teams that are in the past, okay, you team go out and work, you figure it out, you come back and you tell me what you want to do, and then I'll let you know if it's okay. That's the way that it's been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to train that middle manager to relinquish that hands off and let the team make the decision?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that I have a silver bullet on how you solve that problem, because a lot depends upon the individual who's managing the team as well, right? And what their background and what their point of view and where their context is coming from. But what we have to do at the executive level is coach and teach and encourage. And again, I go back to what I said this morning: be very, very consistent in the message that we're sending. And I was in a meeting with my innovation team last week, and so, Jim, we want to hear about the strategy. What's in the strategy? What's going to be new? And I said, sorry guys, if you're sitting around wanting to hear what's new in the strategy this year, it's the same as it was last year, and it was the same as it was the year before. We're doing the same stuff. I like the progress we're making. I like the results we're producing for the company. Yeah, there's some new things that we'll integrate into what we're doing, but the frame is the same, the context is the same, and the business outcomes that are being demanded of my organization are exactly the same. So we're on the path. We're still on the journey, and we're not deviating from that. And I think a lot of you drive that consistency with your middle management team. I think then they end up really getting the message clear, and honestly, I want them out being opportunity hunters as well. So if they're spending I think if your leadership team, at the next level is spending all their time managing people versus coaching them and teaching them, then they're doing the wrong activity. Because I actually want them to coach and teach, let the teams go and learn and develop solutions, and then being out hunting for the next opportunity, because they're the ones who are working with the management teams of the plants, et cetera, to find that next opportunity. And that's where a lot of our opportunities come from in the end of the day.
Quick question. So how do you make it work the other way? Because you bring up a point in terms of millennials bring something new to the table in terms of their discovery process and how they think about things, and there's a lot of value in that. So how do you enable the flow the other way?
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff we discover also comes from the act of solving complex problems. So in the process of solving a complex problem in our operations, we may find 6 or 7 other opportunities that we could go work on. We've got to stay disciplined in solving the problem we're trying to solve, because it has an immediate impact on the business results for this fiscal year or whatever the time frame is. But we try to collect those as well, and if they bound into something more interesting, we'll go bound into something more interesting. And I think Jane said it this morning. I mean, I have some work that's going on in the organization that you would call completely skunk works. I keep it back in the background. It's behind the curtain of Oz, and we're just experimenting on stuff to try to understand what's going to happen next. And really, we're trying to learn what the opportunity really is. It's not clear, it's not well defined, but somebody has an idea. Usually it's coming from somebody in the organization who's fairly new, has a different context, a different set of experiences, and says, I really think we could do that. So I try not to make sure we're stifling those concepts and those ideas. And then we also get a lot of ideas partnering with our strategic partners. They'll come and say, hey, I see you guys doing this in your operations. We were over at Georgia Pacific and they're doing something like this. Is that something that might apply in your context? And we have a conversation around it. We may experiment it in one of our labs and before we take it to the field. And we kind of, I think you have to be willing. Who was it? Somebody this morning was asking what's the definition of experimentation, right? And I completely agree with the definition. I mean, if you're 75% confident in what you're doing, you're not experimenting. I call it go do. Go do it. I mean, okay, maybe you have to pilot it or something first if you want to say a conversation. If you're only 25% confident, you're experimenting. And those usually result, okay, that your hit rate may not be 100% on those, but the results on the interesting ones can be 10 times the result of something you're 75% confident of doing. So
That was the Facebook slide this morning with Instagram.
that was at the
Yeah.
Facebook slide.
Thanks. I'm Kevin Smith with Chevron. While I agree that the millennials have a different thought process, I'd be cautioned to say that they come in with the right digital skill set. If I look at our company, we're very heavy on petrotechs, so mechanical engineers, electrical, petroleum. They come out of school with a different thinking process, but that doesn't mean they're equipped with that IT background, advanced statistics and mathematics. So one of the ways that we work to overcome that in our organization, we're working to, while we have skills matrices for digital, we're working to deploy. We also recognize that that gives about 20% of the value. Most of it's on the job. So we've started to more integrate in mathematicians, IT data scientists with our petrotech functions where it makes sense, so that the engineers are learning with those other skill sets versus being expected to come out. And we do partner with certain universities that have specialized tracks for engineers on digital. And when those individuals are coming in the organization, we're very strategic in where we place them to make sure it's not just an individual contributor, but they're broadening a team's exposure. And I think that's a corporate decision that a lot of companies are looking at now.
Yep, and I would say, just to answer while we're moving around, when you asked that question about mileage, I think that's a great strategy that you just talked about at Chevron. When you were talking too about what's motivating that middle manager, when you have this diversity or you have some of the skills or maybe the willingness to learn but not the full skill set, we haven't really talked about incentives. What is everyone motivated by? And I also think you need to think about, in this new digital transformation era, incentivizing your workforce is very different than it was in the past. Remember, before it was all about a paycheck. And yes, of course, is that one of our primary motivators? Yes, we want a paycheck, we want a raise. But the different folks, the different skill sets that are coming up are incentivized in different ways. This is the great news. Like, sometimes it's about the ability to work remote. It's about the ability to be more flexible. All this is part of it too. So you have to match the incentives. So if I want my middle manager folks to do that kind of work, they need to be incentivized to do that type of work. And incentives are very different now. Again, this is why a good HR person is your ally and your asset, because you can't look at it in the traditional sense of, this is what it is. Here's your paycheck, here's your 401k, here, there's your basics, here's your X weeks of vacation. Though that's also going to be changing because of all the changes that are happening. So I just wanted to make sure you think about that as part of that motivation, and there is, how are you changing your incentives to get those folks?
Yeah, back to defining the problem, right? Spending more time. The example was given earlier. We hear the term millennial brought up a lot just today, and for the last, how many years have we been talking about that? And I think of my own children, and I think they've coined the phrase Zoomers for this new group coming out, and they're even different. So, and then we've got another 20 years of productivity from Generation X. So that they're all out there. And I wonder if we should reframe this argument and say it's not preparing for this new generation that thinks this new specific way. It's modernization. It's something. It's modernizing our workforce, and something we do continuously. That way we get out of these stereotypes, and we really begin to look at the technology that makes us productive, and how do we get the workforce to leverage that technology.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's come out in some of our workforce studies is continuous learning now, that's it. And again, this means continuous learning for Gemini. So I'm not talking about continuous learning, just for the folks that are in the organizations. It's continuous learning up and down the chain to be effective executives. Again, it's a changing world. Remember I told you mentor up, mentor down. You have to have it going both ways. Continuous learning, I'd say, is probably one of the most critical things that I hope, companies are investing in when you're going to make this transformation and win in the transformation and compete. it's all going to be about continuous learning. And I would say adaptability. When we look at skill sets and you look at, even a more generic than like specific jobs, on the good news side, the reality is when you talk about your grandson and things, the adaptability, the ability to learn some of these complicated and other things is much better. So like you said, they come out and it's better that way. There's still a way to go to get them like to the final point there, but that's kind of the good news. What are you looking for in your future workforce? Adaptability. And like how quickly can they learn? Because it's not about technology A, B, C, or D. Blockchain today, blockchain tomorrow. Like, who is going to be able to actually learn that continuously and how quickly? And that's the good news. A lot of the youth has been a little bit more adaptable, I would say.
Yeah, I agree, and I think and that's I think it's so critically important. And there's lots of vehicles that we're trying to kind of reinstill that continuous learning organization mentality in the organization, including experimenting with things like lean startup, et cetera, in the way we do work. And I think it's just so important. For me, it's a non-starter in the organization if I have an employee who is unwilling to learn. It's just, okay, great, let me help you find a job somewhere else, most likely outside the company, because this is not going to work for us. We need folks in the organization who will learn from mistakes, who will learn from others, who will learn from industry groups, who will learn from conferences like this. And will learn through the work that they're doing and the problems that they're trying to solve, and be, I think, secondarily to that, and almost more importantly, share it. Those who hoard learning are really detrimental to the organizational bandwidth and throughput. So it's really important that we share. So when we have a failure in a project, we actually run formal lesson learned processes around it, and we publish what we learn. And it's really important that we do that. And we've done that on some very painful, large capital projects. And if we don't start to build that mentality in the leadership model of what we're doing, we're never going to get it through the whole organization. So I agree 100% with that mentality. And it's not just millennials. I mean, everybody's got the capability to learn. You just have to have the desire, right?
Yeah, the desire and the incentive. And that kind of is a great segue. I think it's one of the things we've been talking a lot about. Okay, this younger generation, Gen Z, Gen X, Zoom, all the lingo. And I love, there's one of the statistics that say, I think it was the World Economic Foundation, I always forget the number, it was like 89% like of the jobs, like for people that are in grade school, those jobs aren't going to exist like in the future, even the titles and everything. So it just goes to show you, even when your kids are like starting their school and starting their path, like you don't even know what the jobs of the future are going to be. We're changing so fast. The job titles, the job skills, like there's going to be things that you can't even dream of right now, right? That they're probably going to need to be doing. So kind of goes to your point on that. I would also like to ask, and especially I know Jim has a lot of experience in this too. We've been talking a lot about the newer folks coming up, like, and how the good and the bad of that. But what about retraining incumbent workers? So we're not trying to say that like all these people are going to be gone, but the reality is we talk about the silver tsunami. We talk about, the incumbent workers, the folks that are retiring. So that's one way. And I know Jim has some great stories on that, like on how folks are transitioning. But also, what do you guys think in terms of retraining your existing workforce besides the net new? So you got two things happening here. Net new coming in, but they're still middle managers and middle-aged folks that are of incredible skills and brilliance, honestly, in the manufacturing floor line. How are we helping assist them through this transition and revolution for folks that didn't start out thinking that way from kindergarten?
So absolutely, yes, that's exactly what we're doing, because I don't want to lose that subject matter expertise. I need it, right? So just need to broaden the skill set. And so that's it. Simple answer, really.
How are you doing that? How are you broadening their expertise?
Well,
That's simple, right? How are you, they have the desire, do they have like, how are you, bringing them along?
Yeah, so we have a learning organization that puts together things like data science skills, and so that's one way. The other way is, as we're going through our transformation or journey, I call it journey, we're exposing people to new ways of working, because it's really about new ways of working. I mean, for me, it's not just it's not that it's almost more the process, right? And I need the people and technology to make it happen. So I need to change the way our process works to make us more efficient. And so getting people on board to being excited about the change in the process gets them excited about learning the technology. I mean, I really don't have a motivational issue with my team at all. So, and it's quite diverse, 40% women, 20% millennial, 20% people my age, and from 3 different countries. So we have and they all want to learn, so they're eager.
I think it's about believing in the workforce, believing that they are capable of learning. I was working on a project, who knows about a project I've been working on in one of our plants, and I'm in there with the plant manager, and I'm working through this analytics project, and I'm articulating, here's what we need to do, here's how we can be successful, here's the things that we're providing you. And he goes, oh, these people aren't capable of learning that. These people aren't capable. And I just stopped and said, if you don't believe they're capable, they never will be capable of doing that. You have to believe that these people want to learn. They are capable of learning. I mean, they came here, they learned the job that you gave them. They didn't make this product before they came here probably. So believe in them and then give them the pathway, give them the tools to do that. Start putting some of the technology out on the floor. Today, like they have them radioing it in when there's a problem, and it causes us all sorts of problem from an analytics side. Like, we need to get out there. Oh, they won't know how to use it. What do you mean they won't know how to use it? All of them have iPhones, and they're all sitting in the cafeteria using their phones. They're all capable. Believe that they are, and we have to believe that at these older workforce, or mid-career workforce folks such as myself, we're all capable of learning and being retrained and reskilled.
Okay, good point.
I just want to echo that. We have a lot of the same problems. People are like, oh, well, these guys, they'll never learn how to use, field bus instrumentation. Why? We can't. We have to copy the HMI exactly when we do the migration project because they won't learn anything new. Really? They can learn how to use the newest thing on their phone. Really? They can't learn anything? That mindset is out there. And it's really strong. I don't know what to do about it, but it's way above me.
So I was just going to share that, I have a side job of trying to help with military recruiting and retention in our company because I have a kind of a dual career. And one of the challenges we have is, again, it's similar but different, is that there's people coming out of the military with a lot of different skill sets. Mm-hmm. But they didn't spend 10 years in packaging or 10 years in pulp and paper or 10 years in building products. And so it's literally just giving them a chance. So I just got a resume earlier today from someone that we're going to look at. So it's a senior warrant officer responsible for like 1,000 armored vehicles, keeping them ready to roll. Mm-hmm. And I think if someone has a skill set to keep 1,000 armored vehicles ready to roll, they can probably be a maintenance leader or planner somewhere in our organization. But we have to kind of break down some paradigms because the first thing they're going to say is, but they haven't been in pulp and paper 10 years. Yeah. Like, well, yeah, but these are transferable skills. These are capabilities. They've got good work ethics and all that great stuff. We can work through that one other thing. So I know that our company is looking at some non-traditional sources of employees. And the biggest challenge is really at that first hiring manager, getting them to kind of break that paradigm of, well, they didn't spend X years and whatever. But that's something we're having to work through because we can't just keep doing what we've been doing, that whole insanity definition, because we're going to have to change.
Right. Well, it goes right back to the comment that was in the back of the room about women and minorities and hiring men into your organization. I agree. Some of our best frontline leaders in our operations are ex-military guys. They're disciplined, they're structured, they know how to lead teams, they know how to build teams that get to common the common goal done. And so, we do love that itself. I'll give you an example of a struggle that we've been having in kind of our technology organization where, traditionally we've hired only masters and PhDs into that area. And, when we started doing some new recruiting into the advanced manufacturing organization that I lead, the question was, okay, so where profile has to say master's, PhD. I said, no, I don't care. Bachelor's degree is fine. It doesn't matter to me. First of all, I don't want people camping in my organization for the next 20 years because I'm going to teach them something and then I'm going to put them in the field. I'm going to put them in plants. I'm going to put them in operations. And I want to bring operations people into the organization because they're going to teach us what's really happening on the floor. So we want that rotation happening through the organization. So therefore, if I already put up an artificial barrier on a resume that says I'm not going to look at you if you don't have a master's or a PhD and not an engineering degree, then that's basically you're walling off 80% of the population in our company. So we stopped doing that, and I think it's important. We've brought people into the organization to work on high-tech projects that have come straight out of college through our rotational operations leadership program in the plants, and now they're actually working on technology projects for the plants because they just spent a 6 or 8 month rotation leading a shift. Perfect people to figure out how to apply technology in the operations. And I love that operation. And then if I can export talent into the operations as well, that means I've just upskilled the technical capabilities in our operations, either as technical leaders in our plants, operations leaders, maintenance leaders, doesn't matter. Those are the opportunities that we're trying to create. And I think you just have to, I agree totally, you have to reframe your whole thinking around talent acquisition and career pathing. And I think, when I was growing up, probably much like you were growing up, I wanted to know what the career path was. Now, my career path, if I mapped it out for you, is totally nonlinear. I've done all kinds of things. If you asked me when I started my career, I'd say, oh, and I've never done that. No, not even interested. I did. I started my career in pulp and paper. And I actually worked in IT, too, and I have a PhD in chemical engineering. So never thought I would do that, especially run the help desk for the company. That was that was an experience that I leaned on heavily on my operations experience in manufacturing to run that. But, I think today, we talk about the millennials or whatever we want to call the young folks coming through our organization. They don't expect a linear career anymore. They want to work on hard problems. They want to make the world a better place, especially the ones joining our company, because we have such a big sustainability stand in our company. They want to make the world a better place. They want to work on important things that impacts their communities and everything else like that. And we have to give them those opportunities. And that's fun, I think. I think it's interesting.
I'm going to get back to the established workforce. And I really can commiserate with Julie. There's nothing more disappointing than getting this awesome new HMI package with all these capabilities, and you build it to look like the black VAX, pipeline diagram. And I've heard others say this, but we let these old tools linger for too long. And if you let these old tools hang out there that folks are comfortable with, they're going to continue to use them. They're not going to go to the next better thing. So I think we need to do a better job of cleaning out our toolboxes, and the wore out tools need to go away.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I came to the conference a little late because I was in Dallas at one of our plants looking at a big investment we had made in new technology in the plants and working with the teams and everything. And so I asked a question when I walked up to one of the HMI screens and I said, so how different is this now versus when we just changed it out? I said, oh, well, so some of the same data is there, presented in the same way, But we engaged the operators when we designed the panels, the panel views, and they said, I need to see this here, that there, and I want this kind of an alarm for this and that kind of stuff. And I said, I love it. You know, how did you do that? Oh, we all sat in a room and we said, what was important to this area of the operation? We said, here's what we have today. Here's what I really need to get better at my job. We're trying to increase capacity in this plant. That's part of the reason why we put more technology in the plant. And, you know, we're going to try to run that equipment higher than it's even rated. To Mike's conversation this morning, we're going to get more throughput out of that plant than it's actually designed to do. And we have to work with the operators to figure out what they need on their screens and what they need in their toolbox in order to make that happen. And that's a dynamic conversation back and forth with the operators. If you're not doing that, then you're not collaborating in the right way in the organization, I think.
And what I would also add on to that, like, how do they even know? We spend so much time evaluating from the executive level, honestly, on down, evaluating the new tools. Rarely are we taking as close a look at as looking at the old tools and when do you expire them, right? To your point, like how many people spend a lot of time on that? They work, you just keep going. Like you don't even think about it. You're not making a conscious effort to go back, look in that toolbox and be like, this hammer no longer works. I'm going to switch it to my digital wrench. You know, like they don't do that. We don't do that. I mean, I think that's a flaw, you know, and a problem that we probably need to kind of look at more in terms of what is out of date, what do you need to change over moving forward. So I think that's a great point. The other thing I wanted to touch on is mission driven, like when we talk about incentives, it kind of ties it all back together because we're talking about the incumbent workforce, right? And how are we, you know, utilizing them? How are we upskilling? How are we training them? Like, yes, they have the skills and yes, they have the ability. Again, I really like that example. One of the things that we've been doing, looking at a huge pipeline issue in cyber. So guess who is like some of the best folks to do the cyber work and that you think you can train programming? It's retired military and folks that already have clearances and other different things. Like there's a lot of hope in that as you diversify, you know, across, you're gonna find some of these great things where the fit is so wonderful and the match is already great that's there. That's one of the things that give me hope, you know, for the future when I look at pipeline issues. And there are a lot of inherent talent. I would also ask you guys one other question. We talk about apprenticeships. So one of the things when we're talking about reskilling of incumbent workers is, you know, do you do apprenticeships across? Everyone thinks apprenticeship means initial, right? Like I'm going to do an apprenticeship when I come in and I'm going to learn this. What about apprenticeships now, the pace of change? And, you know, Jim's saying, I want all my people to be continuous learners. Even that word apprenticeship needs to change in that I want to be an apprentice, like to 6 different jobs, you know, to learn those and figure out what they are. Even that term, you know, is kind of changed in its use. We all like to talk about it. We want apprenticeships, give them more of the practical knowledge, the internal stuff. But even with that, you could move these apprenticeships around in different ways and make them your change agents, kind of as Jim has really successfully done. And I think you were talking about that at Chevron too.
So, you know, talking about retraining the incumbent workforce. You know, I'm sitting here and trying to think with all the discussion that's going on, you know, what in my company and probably in other people's company is one of the big things. And what I'm thinking about, you know, we're a lean company. Everybody's got a lot of things on their plate. Even, you know, everybody does. And the one thing I keep on coming back to is we're not giving our workforce enough time to really learn new things and try to understand. Because I'm seeing basic IT skills that they're just missing, that I would expect the millennials even to have. And I'm wondering if that's something that others are seeing too. Is we're not giving enough time to people to be able to retrain and learn new things.
Yep, I was just a couple comments over. Well, you know, Mike is always about talking about time, not enough time.
I have the mic. I think that's absolutely correct. We developed a program that takes the workforce through what the terms and what the context and the capability needs of Industry 4.0 are. So there's 38 10-minute courses in there. And so we trial this out. And then that's phase 1. Phase 2, we have about 150 new roles, new capabilities that we'll need in the next 3 to 8 years that we had to just make names for, right? And so but we're giving people an opportunity to, if you're a fork truck driver now, you can look at these other opportunities that we're going to be needing. We need you to stay now, but look what you could move into. And so we roll it out not as a pilot, as little trials, just couple of little tests here and there. And I'm like, well, people are signing up, but they're not doing. What is going on? So I call a meeting. I go back down to the mill. I call a meeting, and well, it turns out that my shift supervisor said, okay, if you look from 6 till 6:20, go ahead and knock a couple of those out each day, right? You can do that. And at 6:10, he says, okay, you done with that? Because I got to get you to go over here and fix this pump. We don't give them the time. We just don't give them the time. I'm living proof. Does anybody else, or you guys, right? Okay.
Watch the video, but you don't give any time to watch the video. You don't build that into the workday. That's not fair.
Yeah, so I can a few of my thoughts on the training. You know, I'm a young guy and kind of went into the engineering path, and our the way we used to train for software initially was like you buy a new software, you get a few champions at the site, and you install the software, and you sit them through a few day class, and then you wash your hands clean, and then you say hope the champions take it. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and a lot of times they end up going to another job. You lose your whole kind of resonance in the company with that tool. But even then, within the training classes, you would look at the champions taking the training, and they're all on their phones, not paying attention because the training that we're providing them isn't engaging. And think about a lot of these people that are champions. How did they learn in school? Probably majority of them were doing the same thing in school, not paying attention. And what did they do? They just figured it out. And so I think there's maybe some opportunities for us to rethink how we're training them. It's not just, hey, let's get a classroom environment and have a teacher and then go through some exercises. It's rethinking about how are kids really learning these things in our schools today, and the people that you're hoping to champion these efforts. How did they learn? Did they really need to be trained? I mean, because some people I've watched in these training classes that end up being the champions for these efforts, they're not getting anything from the training that we're providing them. Or even like some of the, hey, go through these, online CBT training videos, and you're just clicking through it as quickly as you can to get through it, so that you don't get bugged that you've been trained. So there's a big opportunity, I think, there to rethink about that, especially with software.
Can I just say, I think that is such a great point. I'll tell you one of the most popular things on our shop floor, our future factory, and it's like a great use when we talk about 5G, even in artificial virtual reality. Everyone wants to be a machinist in the Rolls-Royce engine, and they climb in it, and they love it. They're like, I'm going to fix engines. Like, these crazy people, like it could be everyone from the secretary, like on up to the executives. This is one of the great things about technology, like exactly to your point, like what excites people most. Like if you're doing a static PowerPoint or, the traditional training, you do some incredible VR, it's a game, or you want to teach safety, in different things. How are you going to drive your car? You're simulating like an airplane or an Air Force jet. And you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to crash. I've killed these people. Here's your stuff. There's ways that you can absolutely use technology to make it better and to really actually reinforce it. It's also the same way you get consistency across. Rolls-Royce was laughing when they were doing this training on, so now I learned how to fix an engine. I was pretty excited about it. I was like, I have a new skill set, continuous learning, right? But what was great is, they were training, let's say 50 people all over the country on the exact same thing. This is the great thing about digital twins, for example, all these other ways that you can incorporate and motivate kind of the next generation and train income workers. Because here's the funny thing. We think that's all about the youth and that's what they like. No, the reality is lots of these folks, when you say absolutely they want to be trained, they want to learn, the welders and fitters, they're like, I want to go into that too and let me do that, or let me, kind of learn that skill set too. So there's definitely a want and a need, and that's where we need to use the power of than upcoming technology to actually make that better. Exactly to your point. So I think that's a really great point. I'm sure Jim, you have examples on
Yeah,
this.
no, I mean, I agree totally. I think that everybody learns differently. If there's anything I've learned over the years, everybody has a different way of learning things. Some people like more tactile stuff. Some people can read and just learn. Some people, need to use multimedia and video and hear and be repetitively taught. There's two things that I think are interesting, that I think we've seen some good success in Owens Corning, which I think are interesting. One is relative to time for the shop floor to get training, because the training and the development is a pillar of our TPM, our operating system. Therefore, every employee in the plant has a skill matrix that they have to certify against. Therefore, if your employees aren't certifying at the rate that is expected in order to achieve results in terms of our TPM journey, then the manager actually gets held accountable for it. So there's some checks and balances in there. The other thing that I like that we've been doing recently, and we've been doing a lot more simulation training, which means, an operator sits in front of a station that more or less mimics the process and has some back-end modeling on it. So when they go and they're trying to understand how to change the operation, they push a button, and if they push it wrong, they get a reaction that's negative. They actually not only learn how the process works, but they also learn how the technology that runs the process works simultaneously. And I think there's some huge advantages to doing that, and using your digital twins and some of the other capabilities that you've been building to drive engineering and other functions in the organization, and tying that to real life data and real life scenario planning. And we've had some good success in there in our operations. And then you kind of get a twofold, and sometimes even the technology agnostic people don't even realize that they're actually getting trained on technology simultaneously, right? So you sneak it in there on them.
So as we think about this and we talk about training and needing to get people trained, one of the things I think is key is also applying and putting mentors in place and making sure that people have mentors, and offering to be a mentor or getting a mentor, because I think they also can help drive the need and effort to learn, right? Here's what you need to go learn. Here's what, if you want to go this way in your path, this is what you need to do. Here's how to make it happen. And it's also good to find that person who's a little bit outside your area as well. And we often don't take advantage of that as well. And I tend to mentor a lot of people. Jim knows me for a long time here, and I've had a lot of early career people. And I often mentor them and go, don't just expect me to provide you the training through work. Some of the things that you want to need to learn, there are a lot of opportunities, both free and some low costs nowadays online, that if you want to learn a skill, that maybe we don't offer, or you really want to learn it, take your time to go and learn it. Show me that you have the passion to at least get the basics and the foundations for that. And then we'll go and apply that next level of learning, that higher, that more expensive, more complex level of learning as well. But, linking those together, right? Mentoring and communicating them, driving that through, so that people have an outlet outside of their leader to articulate that message as well is really important.
How many here have a mentor program? Well, that's a good percentage. If you don't have a mentor program, why not? Just curious. Is it time? Is it resources? Is it leadership? Anyone here not have a mentor program? I want to admit. Yeah. We have. We have like I know Dow has one.
But I want to tell kind of a funny story about it. We recently started a mentoring effort called, it was Mentoring for Digital Careers. And I have had so many people ask me, well, what does it mean to have a digital career? And I'm like, well, what do you think it means to have a digital career? And the number of groups that have now joined this little mentoring effort is like 15 groups. And so it's been really fun that to see how people think, what people think of what is a digital career? Like, what is it? Am I one? Are you one? And so if nothing comes out of that mentoring program, at least all of us can acknowledge that we all have digital careers.
Something just struck me there with regards to the budgeting process for training, and is it adequate, right? Has it evolved with as the needs are growing, right? So a couple of my experiences in dealing a lot in automation education is that, you know, the conversation, they'll talk about bottom up and top down. When we speak to executive levels about education, they realize the need for the automation education, but then you get pushed out towards the sites, and then the sites are either time constrained or budget constrained, and it doesn't really get the momentum that it should. So I'm just curious as to whether that needs a bit of revisiting as well.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and you know, we run through those scenarios in our company as well. I do think, and Brian actually had a pretty good point. There are a lot of low-cost ways to get education today. I mean, you know, and I think that's probably a game changer versus formal. I got to spend $30,000 to have a consultant come in and run a class for us on PLC programming or something like that. Today, you can go out and, you know, partner with some of our partners and use online tools to learn how to do basic ladder logic or whatever, you know, whatever PLC programming, object-oriented programming, those kinds of things. So I think the dynamic has changed a little bit. Where we have been, you know, as part of our operational excellence program is really invested, now again, in kind of low-cost areas, but setting aside areas inside our plants which are designated as training and development centers, equipping them with the right tools, whether it's projectors and IT capabilities so that they can do it, but then also, you know, putting excess equipment, old equipment, you know, whatever the case may be, in the training centers so that the employees can work hands-on, you know, in a safe environment, manipulate, tear apart, understand how to do lubrication, cleaning and inspection and all those kinds of things without actually touching live operating equipment while they're doing it. And so those investments, and I would say, you know, it's probably for most of our plants a $25,000 investment one time in order to set something up like that. And then we run the training internally with our SMEs inside the plant itself. You know, so it becomes a self-sustaining kind of thing going forward. But you do have to, you know, and again, that's part of our overall operational excellence program. You know, it's just a realization that we have to do that in order to make it work. You know, and then you go all the way up the scale to, okay, somebody wants to, you know, have the company pay for their master's degree in digital transformation, which is a whole different conversation that you get into with employees about that. And we support those things as well. So it's part of our benefits package and in our rewards and recognition packages as well.
But I think another thing we need to, I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Mike. I think another thing that's a great point about resources, you know, as well as time. You've heard that a lot, common theme. I do think there is a problem with resources and time. And even more so, you know, Jim's an incredible example of what they're doing here, what Georgia Pacific is doing. But, you know, let's also think about it. Who's some of the number one groups that need this training? You know, offense, it's not the Chevrons, it's not the Owens Corning. What about your supply chain? What about the little mom and pop shops? How are they affording their training? How are they? And that's what I love what you just said. I think is a really key point about your SMEs. Like, don't forget, you know, we all talk about our own company. We're worried about where are we doing our resources? What are we doing? But it's a lot bigger than that. And it's going to get bigger because of this digital journey that folks are on. Every time I think of digital journey, when people talk about their own company, I'm like, you better be thinking about supply chain. period, because that is changing. You saw the data that ARC put up front. That's one of the biggest things that's changing. You're getting closer, not just to your customer, which is super critical, but also to your supply chain, and what are the things that they need to do, and how can you be really great on your digital transformation if all the inputs you're getting are not, right? So you got to bring everybody along. That's why it talks about this diversity and where you're at. So I just want to acknowledge that, resources, and that's a huge thing. These are large companies that are saying it's an issue. Take that, multiply it about 100-fold, and then you'll see when you're a 6-person shop that's, shutting down their production or doing something to do training, or it's really, really hard. So we are working on kind of some of those issues, and that's where, again, I hope that technology can help, make that quicker, easier, faster, more reasonable, and I really appreciate and take kudos to the large companies that are also like taking on and helping to train their supply chain.
Yeah, that's a great example. I mean, for some of our customer base today, as a free added service for being one of our customers, we'll provide HR consulting, we'll provide IT consulting to them, we'll provide them with TPM and safety training. I mean, we've been recognized over the past several years for being world-class in our safety performance, and so we'll work both with customers and suppliers on helping them understand how to drive a safety journey forward. So you have to kind of pay it forward and pay it back a little bit too, and I think that's important for companies with the resources to do that, because I think that's a really good point. We have some small suppliers in our ecosystem. They're nowhere near as safe as us. So if we can help them be safer and their workers go home every single day as they came in, it's a good story for all of us to have.
Yeah, they're not as safe and they're not as secure.
Right.
That's the truth. So we have to help that. We have to fix that. Oh, I'm getting the hook on our time. Any final, we're down to our last few minutes. I think this has been great. Mike, I don't know if you wanted to share any insight you were giving me the look.
I was just actually, one thing I am curious about, just complete question, no agenda behind it. Does anybody have someone in their company that is creating what they call some form of digital personas? Anybody? So raise your hand if you know it. I mean, I think that's the answer. Okay. You're planning to? Okay. I've seen a lot of success with those, and because it operates on a number of different levels. The idea is that you have a spectrum of folks, and you can account for all sorts of things in terms of what their age and experience is, how they react to learning, what their job roles are, all these different factors that you can account for, and you build profiles of them. So let's say you have 6 different profiles of digital personas. So whenever you roll out an initiative, your organization, and usually these are folks, the companies that do these well have really good cross-functional teams that manage the creation of this process. They understand what the initiative is and how that relates to the personas that will be involved, and they can start to design. It's not one-to-one interactions relative to a project or training or whatever happens to be, but very close approximations for how do you work those people through this initiative in a way that makes them most successful to the outcome of the project. The one that I know is being done quite well is Rolls-Royce. And if anybody does want any information on that, I'd be more than happy to put you in touch with somebody there that hopefully could explain in a little more detail. But if that's not something that you're doing, I would encourage you to at least look at that. Might not work in your company, but it's something I've seen success with on a number of different fronts. So for what that is worth.
Yeah, just to add on to that, Mike, just from a practical point of view, we love doing those exercises because it maps work as it's done today to mapping work to how it's going to do in the future. And sometimes that obviously yields some interesting results. And oh, that's what you mean when you say we're going to go do it that way. I don't like that. Let's figure out something else. And you end up iterating around it a little bit, which helps you build better results in the end of the day. So I totally agree with what you just said.
Okay, well, I think we are pretty close here. First of all, thank you so much. Love talking with you guys. What normally I'd wait a couple minutes and we'd run this out just a little bit more, but as we did in the earlier session, I want to make sure we do now. It's possible that you heard something that resonated with you from somebody else, or you know something that could be of help to somebody else. So before we close, just take a couple minutes, and if something resonated with you and you do want to make a contact with somebody else, go do that now. Exchange cards, ideas, and information so that you can, as I think is becoming equally important, learn how to do something about what you're hearing, because that is key. So thank you very much, everybody. Really appreciate the input.